Aloha, I'm Lyla Berg. Mahalo for tuning in to Island Focus. We're here at ʻIolani Palace, royal residence of Hawaii's monarchy, to converse with people who can help us understand how the past can inform the future. Thank you for tuning in to Island Focus. So this is the Grand Hall. I'm overwhelmed with the artifacts, but also the paintings on the wall.
Those are paintings of Kalakaua predecessors, beginning in one corner with Kamehameha I. He not only unified the islands into a single kingdom, but he also began a tradition where the ʻali'i combined traditional cultural practices, ideas, materials, and tools with imported, what we would call haole. Now, I'm not talking about haole as in Caucasian, but haole in terms of foreign. One of the things that had the most impact on the islands was literacy. The American missionaries changed Hawaiian from an oral only to a written language. And once the ʻali'i started learning how to read, everybody wanted to learn how to read. So one of the most literate nations in the world. We just reveled in sharing stories with each other. In the Hawaiian language newspapers were always asking everybody for more content. How do you make your canoes? How does your cousin make the canoes? How does the kupuna on Kauai make their canoes? So they were sharing cultural practices.
And isn't that the message of the palace?
I think so, yeah. Who we were, a independently recognized sovereign nation. Internationally recognized by Great Britain, France, and the United States. Kalakaua wanted Hawaii to be part of a Pacific Union, right, because they wanted to connect with people of similar ancestry, ethnic background.
Oh, and looking at all these portraits, you can't help but feel proud.
Yeah, got to. You love them.
Yeah. It's wonderful to see you again, Paula, especially in these beautiful hallowed halls.
I'm blessed to come to work every day to help to care for this magnificent place. This is Wahipana, sacred special place to not only our Hawaiian people, our lahui, but to many, many others as well. It's been tough. The pandemic has made it really tough. But we really onipa'a and persevere, knowing that the bigger picture is making sure that this is standing and we're sharing this story for generations to come.
You know, not being native Hawaiian, but understanding the history of Hawaii. When I drive by this building and this property, I feel challenged about what I'm doing in the future to not only preserve the palace, but also to take the lessons from the past and move them forward. In your role here at the palace, how are you helping people to remember?
There are a number of things that we're doing. One, we let the people know how vulnerable this building is. Mm-hmm. It is this old house, right? 140 years old this year was when they opened the doors to ʻIolani Palace. And it needs a lot of work. But also it's the stories that we tell. Mm-hmm. You know, a lot of people come here and think of the overthrow first and foremost. But when you walk in here and you meet these people who are on the wall, it tells you the dynamic and positive and beautiful history of a sovereign Hawaiian kingdom and what our ʻali'i did that was so much different than any other royalty around the world and how they cared for their people. And so we also celebrate, you know, we celebrate Kamehameha III, started education, right? Started the fire department, so many things, right? We also celebrate Kalakaua. We look at these lights here, and it was electric lights 4 years before the White House. We try to celebrate that history. He was really a Renaissance man. He had one foot firmly planted in who he came from, bringing back hula, bringing back hale noa, bringing back the societies, the myths and legends. But he also had one foot firmly planted in the future. And it was always looking for what was going to be better for his people. You know, I always hear people who say, well, if Hawaii wasn't part of the United States, you could just say goodbye to your cell phone. I think we would have had a cell phone before anyone else because he was that dynamic. And that was our people. At one point during Kalakaua's reign, we were at a nearly 100% literacy rate, highest in the world. And so we really need to celebrate who we were, who we are today, and who we can be in the future, but also remembering the overthrow and the things that happened and pivotal moments that happened right here, the throne room where the ʻIolani was set on trial following that counter-revolution and then taken upstairs and imprisoned for 8 months. And so it's not only the sad things, but it's also the exciting and beautiful things that were happening here in Hawaii. This kingdom was phenomenal.
And what I appreciate about what you're sharing at the moment is it is the present as well as the past and the future that we're talking about. When I look at the artwork that's collected here, the relationship with the international community it's unheard of now even. How do you see the palace moving forward?
So a big project that we're working on that you won't see for another 2 years or so is our galleries in the basement area. Because we have a lot of people that come here and it's not only visitors. And I think it's very important that we're open for visitors because this may be the only chance we have to tell our story. They may not get beyond here. You know, the rest might just be your usual, vacation fare. So I think it's super important. But it's also our lahui and other residents that come through and children that come through. People come in and say, what led to this building being built?
Right.
Like, what was up with this? It's so beautiful for 1882, right? And what happened after the overthrow in 1893? Not only to this building, but to our people. And so our downstairs galleries that we're working on right now will help to touch on Hawaii history. And so it's, what led up through Kamehameha, Ekahi, uniting the islands, and then going into a constitutional monarchy later, and then the bayonet constitution, and then the overthrow, and then what happened in the overthrow. We had the resistance by the Royal Hawaiian Band, and it's telling the story through the people. And then it picks up after all of that. And we have a whole section that talks about, as a sovereign kingdom, who we were in touch with. Treaties with over 24 countries, offices, nearly 130 worldwide, including South Africa. We, like you said, we were spread out all over the place. And Kalakaua's trip around the world as the first monarch to do so, where he visited and the relationships that he built, and all of them have built over the years. And then we take it through to the sovereignty movement of today.
And this is the Pico, actually, right? Of not just Honolulu, but of the Hawaiian culture. How might other agencies, other organizations, the Department of Education, even independent schools, how might they be involved in sharing the messages that you're also explaining?
Well, we have school tours, which unfortunately, the pandemic put a stop to. And we're working with the schools to do that, to try to help them get transportation to come here and so forth. We're working on 7 new dynamic tours that actually are more focused on ages instead of like one tour that you kind of change out with whoever comes in. And it's all the way from pre-kindergarten on who are these people? What is a kahili? What is a sign of power in Hawaii? What is a pulo'ulo'u? And so forth, all the way up to kingdom diplomacy. And each one of them will have an activity that will help them reinforce what they learned, making their own royal order, solving problems as a diplomat and so forth. So I think that's an important part of what we're hoping to engage, not only DOE, but Hawaii Independent Schools as well. We're also hoping to work with the University of Hawaii on some issues as well.
I'm going to encourage you to consider working with the legislature, because what you're speaking about it's who we are here. And I believe that as they begin to understand who we were, who we are, then we'll have a better sense of moving forward. For the future, what do you envision?
The legislature, we've begin to build a relationship with the legislature, this year receiving operational funding for the first time since 1998, letting them know not only the mo'okuhau or the genealogy of this precious place to the Lahui and to Hawaiians, but also the legislative background. After the overthrow, this was the provisional, the republic, the territory, and the first 10 years of statehood right here. The throne room is where the House of Representatives sat. Right. And Martin Luther King Jr. spoke to them in that room. And the dining room is where the Senate sat. So it's reminding them that this is an important place for many different reasons, and that we do need some assistance. Also rebuilding our relationships with the ali'i trusts and the different organizations so that we can all come together. And then also reminding people that something as simple as making a donation or becoming a friend of ʻIolani Palace or bringing your family here is really important as well. Because you want people to feel connected and not just drive by and shed a tear or, you know, I mean, so many people do. When I took over, they're like, oh, I haven't been here since I was like in 4th grade. I don't want to hear that anymore, you know? You really need to come and see it.
Well, and you use the word connected, connection. As we close our conversation for today, the connections are what not only will give the funding and also the understanding, but the connection with the world.
That's kind of our long-range goal as well. The pandemic kind of slowed it down. I like to try to get things done. And I realize it's going to take time. But we've started to reach out to the countries that we had treaties with, not only to reestablish just the initial relationship, but to have them share what they know about the relationship we had. And it's really interesting. You know, you'll have in Switzerland, we had a docent go there. They were able to find documents of Kalakaua in Switzerland, just so we can bring to light this major connection on a worldwide level that we had and we could continue to have.
And that Hawaii was a leader.
Hawaii was a leader. We were, and that was one reason why he built this. The ʻIolani Palace that was here before was a beautiful wooden structure. It was huge and it was beautiful. But like many older structures, the termites got to it. And so when he built this, he really wanted this to serve as an example to the world that the Hawaiian kingdom was modern, educated, and well respected. And I think when you look at it and you learn the history, you realize that.
Well, thank you so much for reminding us about the significance of this place and who we are. And it's wonderful to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you. So nice to see you again, too. So happy that you came here.
Thank you. You've just had the opportunity to meet Paula Akana, Executive Director for ʻIolani Palace. This is the crown room, the throne room.
Throne, yes. Throne room, audience room, reception room. Kalakaua had an opportunity to meet people, to greet people. He always was curious about who they were, where they were from, why they were traveling. But he also used the throne room to thank local community members for service to the community. So this is where you might have been presented a royal order, like the orders you see on the wall here. Or he may have received royal orders delivered by emissaries from other nations around the world. But I mentioned Kamehameha I combining foreign and Hawaiian cultural practices. Big time that happened during Kalakaua's coronation, which is a Western ceremony. There were Hawaiian ceremonies, but the coronation in 1883 was a Western ceremony. Crown, sword, and scepter in the case, Western symbols of rank, ordered from London.
So when we talk about education and literacy, it's not just being able to speak English or other languages. It's about the world.
It's about the world. At Kalakaua, our community was primarily bilingual, Hawaiian and English. And then you have people that are also fluent in the languages of their home nations, Germans, French, Chinese, Japanese, and they become trilingual, like my great-grandfather, 3 languages.
It's fascinating that so long ago, they understood Hawaii's place in the world and also what Hawaii could offer the world.
I think so, yeah, definitely.
Fabulous. Thank you. Dankeschön, dass du hier bist.
Gern geschehen, das freut mich sehr.
Und seit langem haben wir uns nicht gesehen, aber jetzt im Palast ist doch wirklich etwas.
Das ist was ganz Besonderes hier heute, ja. Das ist wirklich besonders.
Thank you for being with us today and for helping us understand the relationship that Hawaii had with the international community, as Consular Corps. Please help us understand a little more about what it is you do.
I am a member of the Consular Corps Hawaii, an organization that has existed for almost 200 years in Hawaii. It is a meeting and organizational group that helps consuls do their job in Hawaii. We regularly meet at least 12 times a year, probably more, and we try to tackle current affairs, but we also deal with our day-to-day operations issues.
And day-to-day operations means?
So we all do various degrees of the same thing. In my case, I issue passports for German nationals that live in Hawaii, emergency passports, I process biometric passports. We do all the documents that Germans need to execute their will or a purchase agreement, and they need a formalized signature under there, a notarized signature. And I think that's probably to one degree or another the same for all active consuls in Hawaii. We're the mediators between things that happen here in Hawaii and that need to be legally enshrined, so to say, back in our sending nations.
Well, and your role as former dean, of course, representing the Corps, is significant, particularly as the German honorary consul, because of the relationship that the monarchy had with Germany.
Yeah, that is a very special relationship, and not many people actually know how special it is. I think it is noteworthy that two cities in Germany had a friendship and cooperation contract with Hawaii, and that's Bremen and Hamburg. Back then, Germany was not united, so both cities had independent contracts with the Hawaiian monarchy. And when Germany was united under the Kaiser, this friendship contract was then extended and became the German Kaiserreich and the Hawaiian monarchy or kingdom. And this contract resides right across the street. It's in a big purple binder, and in beautiful lettering describes that every Hawaiian can settle in Germany and every German can settle in Hawaii.
Is it still existing?
Nope. The Kaiserreich does not exist anymore, and neither does
Neither
kingdom.
the kingdom. Well,
So it's
some might
null and
argue with
void,
that.
unfortunately, and but it's a beautiful document, and it was executed to recognize Hawaii in one way, and in another to also see to it that the existing relationships between Hawaii and Germany would be supported. As you know, before 1917, German companies were quite strong in Hawaii, and they were mainly from Bremen and Hamburg.
So tell us a little bit more about those German companies so that we can...
Oh, okay. That's my favorite pet peeve. So there's the biggest one of them was Hackfeld and Co., which was located where you now have the Topa Towers. It was a big, beautiful building that then later on became the American Factors building. AmFac, exactly. And Hackfeld was as the name indicates, was a factoring company. So they did back end for sugarcane manufacturers, agricultural businesses. So they paid all the bills, raked in all the money, and organized shipping. And they became very big with this. Then there was Ehlers, who later turned into a Liberty House, and numerous others, too many to mention, that were mostly in sugarcane and shipping.
You know, we don't always remember at all, or maybe some of the young ones even haven't been taught, that Hawaii's place in the world was significant. Here we are in the middle of the Pacific, but with relationships with more than a dozen countries.
And I think that's still represented today. We have 35 active consuls, 10 emeritus, and 25 associate members. not every state in the United States can say that they have a consular corps of that size and magnitude. We have 6 professional consulates here. So, the Japanese consulate is 40 people strong. That's pretty sizable. That's bigger than the German consulate in San Francisco or LA. If you go back in history, this location in the middle of the Pacific has always been significant, and it still is. So it's fun to be a part of this group, the Consular Corps, because it has so much variety. We have people from all continents, except for Africa, unfortunately, unless you count Morocco, which we do have. It is a place where people come together, and I think that's the name of this island, isn't it? The gathering place.
I think it was the vision of the Queen for all of Hawaii to be a place where we could gather and be included. And you had said earlier in a conversation that Hawaii was a light.
I can't speak for the entire continent of Europe, but I can definitely say for Germany that Hawaii had a very special place and has a very special place in the hearts of the people. I think a lot of people projected dreams and visions into the most beautiful way you could spend your life into the Hawaiian Islands. And even today, you will find that many of the visitors appreciate these islands more than they would other places.
And you take visitors here to help them understand not only the history, but the place that Hawaii has in the world.
I do take foreign dignitaries to the palace because I want them to know what Hawaii was and where Hawaii comes from. A lot of German officials do not know that there was once a formidable kingdom with a palace and with monarchs and what we call a Hofstaat, a court, a royal court. And this is very important for them to see, and I do make sure they do.
What's the vision of the role that the Consular Corps will play in Hawaii?
So first of all, it is a meeting place for us to discuss and work on current affairs issues, to deal as a group with things that impact us as foreign dignitaries. It is also an organization that has some ability to bring topics onto the plate, give them a little bit more room than otherwise possible. And because we are also tapped into a lot of other organizations that play a big role in Hawaii, we can invite dignitaries from other groups and sort of set topics the way we think is appropriate.
The Queen had a very special relationship with Henry Berger. How does that play out now?
Interestingly enough, the mayor of Coswick, which is the town that Henry Berger came from, the composer and band leader of the Royal Hawaiian Band, and as you know, he was invited by the king to come here and set up a band that exists to this day, the Royal Hawaiian Band. So the mayor came to see if there was room for a partnership between Honolulu and Coswick. Coswick still has a music school, and Henry Berger is very well known in Coswick. He's one of their foremost citizens. So he reached out to then Mayor Kirk Caldwell to see if it's possible, and I think they're working on it to see if that link can be put back into life.
So as we wrap up our conversation for today, looking at Hawaii having a place in the world as Hawaii.
I'm always most impressed with Nainoa Thompson's depiction. He always says, Hawaii is the torch of the world, the torchlight. It shines a beacon to where we should be going. And I think he is so right about that. Hawaii really is the place where everybody can exist the way they came. Hawaii does not force you to become somebody else. And I think as such, this community here is very special in the world. And I can say that because I've lived in several places, and it is a model for the outside.
Vielen Dank für Ihre Zeit, für Ihr Herz und viel Aloha.
Oh, vielen Dank.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for listening to my conversation with Denis Salle, Honorary Consul of Germany. Mahalo for tuning in to Island Focus. I'm Lyla Berg. On behalf of the Island Focus crew and the entire staff at Ōlelo Community Media, aloha and malama pono. Let's take care of our Hawaiʻi. See you soon.